Welcome to New Stripe City, a YouTube channel for die-hard Bengals fans. I'm your host, Ace Boogie, and welcome to the new viewers and the returning die-hard subs to the channel. We do weekly interviews here and provide analysis on the latest Bengals breaking news. So if you're new here, please consider subscribing. And if you want to know how to subscribe, there's a button below this video, and we also provide a link in the video description. So if you're looking for that, it should be there. So today we're here to talk about the 2011 Cincinnati Bengals, and I wanted to choose this team because most people talk about the 2005 Bengals and the 2015 Bengals, but a lot of people forget just how good the 2011 Bengals were. You have to remember that this was a Bengals team that was projected to finish last place in the AFC North. No one expected them to do anything. People actually expected them to repeat the 4-12 performance that the 2010 team did. Boomer Esiason was even quoted as saying that he thought that if they force-feeded Dalton by starting him, that they would get him killed and he would get eaten alive. Bengals entered the 2011 season coming off a 4-12 finish from 2010. There was a lot of uncertainty coming from 2010 because Marvin Lewis had his contract in and was looking to get extended. But before he got an extension, he met with Mike Brown and made some demands over roster control and other aspects in order to return. Marvin agreed to a 2-year extension, and then a bombshell dropped. Carson Palmer was demanding a trade, and if the Bengals wouldn't trade him, then he would retire. He was officially Bengalized. Marvin tried to reconcile this by flying out and meeting with him, but it seemed that Carson had had enough, so the Bengals had to go in another direction. First, they ended up trading Chad Ochocinco to New England for a 5th-round 2012 draft pick and a 6th-round 2013 draft pick. This would end up leading the Bengals to drafting Marvin Jones and Kobe Hamilton. In hindsight, the Bengals got over on the Patriots, but at the time, it seemed like the Bengals were giving away one of their top franchise pieces for next to nothing, especially given that the Redskins tried to trade 2 first-round draft picks for Chad just in 2008. But the Bengals weren't done. They then traded in August a 7th-round pick in the 2013 draft to bring Taylor Mays, the safety from the 49ers, to Cincinnati. And the Bengals weren't done yet. They still had one move left. And in October 18th of 2011, the Bengals traded the retired, quote-unquote, Carson Palmer to the Raiders for a 1st-round pick in 2012 and a 2nd-rounder in 2013, which ended up being Dre Kirkpatrick and Giovanni Bernard. Outside of the players, though, Marvin had to fix his coaching staff. Bob Bratkowski had worn out his welcome, the offense was predictable, and Marvin and the brain trust of the Cincinnati Bengals had to find a young offensive mind that could do something with this team and make it more innovative. And they settled on going to the Arena League and going with young coach Jay Gruden, the brother of John Gruden, one of the offensive geniuses of the NFL. And so with Jay, they felt like they would be able to bring a more exciting offense and get back to that kind of offense that they had that was exciting in 2005 and could come in and do some innovative things. On defense, they stuck with Mike Zimmer, who had already turned around a defense that was a laughable one to a respectable unit, and he was finally getting to make his imprint on bringing in his own players and attracting those players to fit into his system. And so with that, the Bengals had their coaching staff set and were ready to start the 2011 draft. When the 2011 draft arrived, most people expected the Bengals to take a quarterback with that 1st-round draft pick. Cam Newton went off the board, number 1 overall, and once it came to number 4, the Bengals received a trade offer from the Falcons with several draft picks to move up. The Bengals turned it down and took A.J. Green, a wide receiver out of Georgia. And I think the rest is history. And in the 2nd round, they followed that up with taking Andy Dalton, who Jay Gruden had loved and had a huge crush on him, especially from the Senior Bowl. And so the Bengals were heading into a season with 2 rookies starting for them. But there was another issue. Although the season had started and the draft had went on, the NFL was still in a lockout and hadn't come to an agreement. So this meant that players had to take it upon themselves to start their own OTAs and bring people together. And this is what planted the seeds for this 2011 team. Veteran offensive tackle Andrew Whitworth took it upon himself to organize some team activities in a camp to bring players together so that they could learn the new offense, learn this whole new system, and get adjusted and prepared before the season as they awaited the lockout to end. And so next, we're going to talk about where that 2011 season went after this. New Stripe City is proud to announce that our channel has partnered with Fanatics, an NFL licensed merchandiser for NFL.com and Bengals.com as well. Through Fanatics, you can buy men's and women's and kids' Bengals apparel and jerseys, and also help grow our channel through using the links in our video description. When you do that, it truly helps grow the channel, and we did this because it allows Bengals fans to not only enjoy our content, but also get top-tier authentic Bengals merchandise. So if you're looking to get a new Burrow or T. Higgins jersey or even a fresh hoodie or a hat, click on the link in our description. And when you do that, it helps support the channel. Now, when you order a rookie's jersey, and that by rookie I mean Joe Burrow or T. Higgins, it's a special event item, meaning that the NFL has to confirm rookie jersey numbers first before sending it out for production and shipment. And also with COVID-19, it also has slowed this process down as well. So one thing that you'll notice is that you may receive an initial delivery date of October, but that is due to those restrictions. I've been told by Fanatics' support team that once jersey numbers are confirmed and the supply is received, that the item will immediately ship out, meaning that you can expect to get your item sooner than October. However, if you have any questions about your order or when it's going to be shipped or any details, you can reach out to the Fanatics support team on Twitter at Fanatics Support. You can direct message them with your order number and they will give you an update on it. But your jersey is covered for up to 365 days. And this is something that applies to whether you buy it on NFL.com's NFL shop or the Bengals Pro Shop online. We all are under these restrictions, so bear with us. We appreciate it. And as usual, make sure that you're rocking with us on Who Day, all day, every day, and especially on Sunday. One thing I don't think that people remember about this team was just how deep and how solid they were. Like when I went back and rewatched this season, several things stuck out to me. You look at the wide receiving core: AJ Green, Jerome Simpson, Andrew Hawkins, Jordan Shipley, Andre Caldwell. The Bengals were more than capable of having a very solid wide receiving core, more than people really expected. They also had an extremely talented Jermaine Gresham, who ended up turning in a Pro Bowl year that year and was a huge weapon for them. And then they also had some solid reserves at tight end, and Donald Lee and Bo Scaife, who eventually got injured, as well as Chase Kaufman. And when you look at the running back position, it was a running back by committee led by Cedric Benson. They also had Bernard Scott, who was the quick back, and then they also had Brian Leonard, who was a solid back as well, who could catch out of the backfield and run. So they were stacked. When you look at the offensive line, they had Andrew Whitworth, they had Andre Smith, but they also had depth. They had Bobby Williams was starting for them. They had Kyle Cook, but then they also had Anthony Collins. They still had Clint Bowling, although he didn't play that season. They were loaded. They had a lot of people. Dennis Rowland. You talk about Mike McGlynn. So they not only had quality starters, but they also had quality backups. And that's what I'm talking about, the depth that this team had. And on the flip side, the defense was just as talented. You're talking about a defensive line that featured the Fisher-Price package. You're talking about Geno Atkins, Carlos Dunlap, Michael Johnson, Pat Sims, but they also had a Domata Peko. They also had a Jonathan Fanene, a Robert Geathers, a Frosty Rucker. They were extremely talented on the defensive side of the ball, and it showed because they ended the season with 45 sacks. And to me, when I saw that, it was like, man, this was one of the best defensive lines that the Bengals have ever had when I watched it. And then when you look at the linebacking core coming off of the 2019 season, you'd be foaming out the mouth because you've got guys like Thomas Howard, Brandon Johnson, Ray Maluga, Vinny Ray, Dan Scooter was coming off the bench, Keith Rivers was on IR. They also had Manny Lawson playing a lot. So this was a talented team. And then you get to the secondary, and this was after the Bengals let Jonathan Joseph walk in free agency, but they still were well loaded at that position with Leon Hall, who essentially ended up getting hurt in week 10 and tearing his Achilles, but they had Leon Hall. They also had Nate Clements, who they had signed. They also had Adam Jones, who they had assigned, and he was coming off of an injury and couldn't start the season, but he was coming off of the bench. They also had Kelly Jennings, another solid corner. And when you got to the safeties, it got even more ridiculous. You had Reggie Nelson, you had Chris Crocker, you had Jabril Wilson, you also had Taylor Mays. So they were stacked at the safety position. Jeremy Miles was another one. So this team was stacked, bro. So coming out of the gates, they finished 1-3 in the preseason, and most people thought this team was going to be destined for doom. And surprisingly, they started off the season with the first win against the Cleveland Browns. By week 4, this team was 2-2. They were very solid, they were finding their ways, and they were doing little things to figure things out. So initially, they started off with Jerome Simpson as the number 1 receiver, AJ Green was the number 2, and then they quickly realized AJ Green was extremely good, and Andy Dalton was a solid quarterback. So they started to find their way. But then Jordan Shipley got hurt week 2. That pushed Andre Caldwell up into the starting lineup at the slot position, and he just wasn't getting the job done. He was solid, but he couldn't get it done. And then Baby Hawk, Andrew Hawkins, started to emerge, and that's when the offense just really clicked. They were able to run, they were able to pass, and that's what took them to that 2-2 record. So they had wins against the Browns, and they had a win against the Bills. And when you look at their other 2 games against the Broncos and 49ers, those were close too. 22-24 and 13-8. I mean, the Bengals were really better than people expected them to be. Then something crazy happened. The Bengals went on a streak. They whooped the Jaguars. They beat the Colts. They beat the Seahawks. They went into Tennessee and beat them. So the Bengals were 6-2. They had their first 5-game winning streak since the '88 Super Bowl year. You could tell that this team was really feeling confident. And then came week 10, where the Bengals had to go against the Pittsburgh Steelers for the first time. It was a close one. The Bengals could have won it, but they ended up losing. So then they fell to 6-3, moved out of first place for the AFC North. Then they met Baltimore in week 11. They lost again in another close one, literally at the last second. And in that one, that moved them down. And then week 12, they get back on track with the Browns, improving to 7-4. They lose again. This time was a blowout to the Pittsburgh Steelers. So they fall to 7-5. They're scrambling at this point, trying to figure out how they can make the playoffs. And to me, this next game in week 14 really had implications now that we look back on it. They lose to the Houston Texans at the very last minute, and they fall to 7-6 and are in danger of falling out of the wild card hunt. And why this game was so important is because we all know this team ended up seeing those Texans in the wild card. If the Bengals win this game, it's likely that they're not even playing in the wild card, or at least if they are, they're not playing against the Texans, and maybe the Titans actually sneak in there, because the AFC was very competitive this season. But just keep that thought. The Bengals would have to beat out the Jets for that last wild card spot. The Steelers and Ravens were already ahead of them. They had pretty much locked their tickets for the playoffs. But then the Bengals woke up and they played the Rams. They whooped them up, and then they went into week 16 and just really tore them up. And Jerome Simpson really tore loose this game. This was the game that he did a complete flip over Darrell Washington into the end zone, and they improved into 9-6. Then week 17, they had to go against Baltimore. Although it was a close game, this was a game that they lost. And this had implications for Baltimore getting in and locking that thing up. So those 2 wins late in the season put the Bengals into the driver's seat in the wild card spot, and they had to take on the Houston Texans on the road. And this was a game that most people were looking forward to since it was a rematch of Week 14. The Bengals were taking on the Texans, who had TJ Yates at quarterback, who they had faced early on but was having somewhat of a sensational season. And Marvin Lewis had said that if the Bengals didn't get Andy Dalton, they actually had their eyes on TJ Yates in the draft. So that was somewhat surprising. But in the wild card game, many people forget that the Bengals struck first. They went up 7-0. AJ Green was on fire and was targeted early and often, but Arian Foster was able to run the Texans score in to tie it up, so it was 7-7. The next drive, Mike Nugent missed a field goal wide right, so that kind of took away some momentum, but the Bengals defense held on the next drive. They got great field position for the offense thanks to a great catch by Donald Lee and a penalty. Then Nugent makes up for it and he hit a 37-yarder to put the Bengals up 10-7 in the second quarter. Arian Foster continues to shred the defense, and he already had about 69 rushing yards in the second quarter, but the Bengals were able to hold the Texans to 3 and tie it up with 1 minute and 48 seconds left in the second. And this is what really turned the tide of the game. Andy Dalton made the fatal mistake with the lead and 58 seconds left. On his own 30, he threw an interception pick six touchdown to J.J. Watt, which put the Texans up 17-10 at halftime. The Bengals start the second half with the ball. They go 3 and out due to a 12-man on the huddle penalty. And then Foster just continues to pound them, averaging over 6 yards per carry at this point. But Reggie Nelson comes up with a big safety blitz and forces a punt. Foster then starts to kill them in the receiving game on the ground. And then after that, they go 3 and out again. And Chris Crocker almost drops an interception. And 2 plays later, Andre Johnson catches a touchdown to put the Texans up 24-10. The Bengals don't even target AJ Green in the third quarter, and the offensive line is letting Dalton getting pressured, and he's getting sacked, and then he throws up a prayer in the triple coverage that gets intercepted. They go for AJ Green again, and Dalton is picked off for a third time. And then Arian Foster pretty much puts the nail in the coffin with Chris Crocker riding his stiff arm down the sideline like a roller coaster on the way to another Houston touchdown. And so the Texans are now up 31-10. There's only 3 minutes left in the game, and the Bengals can't even convert on Houston's 10-yard line, and Dalton almost throws his 4th interception in the end zone. And that closes the 2011 season. It ended on a bad note, but when you really look back at it, there were a lot of things that stuck out to me. Number one, how deep this team was and how good it was. It's no surprise now looking back that they finished 9-7. I honestly think this team could have won 11 to 12 games. There were several games that they were close into that came down to the last minute. When I really think about it, one that comes to mind is the Texans game. You also talk about one of those Baltimore games they could have won. They could have won the Steelers game as well. So this team could have won at least 11 to 12 games. And then you also look at that Texans game. If the Bengals beat them during the regular season, do they even play them? Do they get, some kind of tiebreaker there? Or do they play the Titans, who they beat handedly early in the season? That's something that we'll never know. What happens if Chris Crocker catches that interception? What if Andy Dalton doesn't throw that interception to J.J. Watt? These are things that will remain to be unknown. But this has been the 2011 Bengals recap. I am Ace Boogie, and as usual, I will leave you guys with a who day, all day, every day, and especially on Sunday.